Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Makeup and Mental Health. Today, we are going to be talking about breaking cycles. But y'all, the sun is sunning, so y'all know that we do have to put on sunscreen before we do our makeup. I am applying my personal favorite sunscreen. It is by Bioma. It is so lightweight. It sits so well on top of my skin prep and under my makeup. So it feels so empowering to be the one breaking cycles in your family or in your partnership. That being said, it's also okay if it doesn't feel super empowering all the time. Sometimes it can also feel a little bit confusing, and we'll talk a little bit about why too. So, most families have what is almost like an emotional level of harmony in between everyone. Over time, this emotional harmony kind of becomes the baseline or like the routine balance between everyone in the family, partnership, or household. So, the way that this family system is set up is generally what we would refer to as the family homeostasis. So, again, that homeostasis looks different for every family. In these family and partnership systems, most people will generally take on a certain role. For some people, this can be a caretaker role, this can be a peacemaker role. Some people might feel as though they identify as the family scapegoat. And some people might also feel like they are the ones that kind of withdraw or stay out of it or stay quiet, right? These are super common roles amongst a number of families and family systems. So, when a certain person, our cycle breaker, comes to the family system with wanting to place boundaries, not wanting to continue certain cycles, maybe not wanting to invite anymore a certain expectation aimed towards them, that is technically defying the norm of the family system or the homeostasis. And when I say that it's technically a disruption in the family system, that's not a bad thing. It just means that you are no longer accepting for the cycles that have already been created to continue, right? And that's essentially what it is in a nutshell, and why so many of us cycle breakers sometimes feel like wanting to be different and break cycles sometimes feel like it comes with more consequences than it does rewards. So, for example, when someone in the family system decides to start placing a boundary or even wants to communicate something as simple as, I'm going to therapy. If you are the first person in your family who is going to therapy, this is going to be new information that the system has not yet ever been provided. It can be pretty interesting to see how they are going to adapt. And sometimes it's not always the way that we wish that they would adapt. Also, depending on the kind of response you wish to receive from the people you are communicating these boundaries or changes to, they might feel that there's an expectation on them to adapt to us as well. And I think it's hard for anybody to receive negative feedback after vocalizing a change that someone truly believes that will benefit them, especially in BIPOC communities where many cultures and backgrounds are so family oriented, right? It can really feel like we are no longer accepted, like we might no longer belong, like we are doing wrong for wanting to look after and prioritize ourselves, which again, prioritizing ourselves is something that's already like comes with feelings of feeling selfish. Maybe it doesn't always feel right, or maybe it's something we're still learning how to do. There are so many values in collectivistic culture, such as loyalty, honoring our elders, making sacrifices, that I think a lot of people in many BIPOC communities already take into account. So when we communicate that we want to change something or set a boundary that kind of looks different than the generational patterns that were set before us, a lot of the times this is why it's not received well by our families or whoever we're trying to communicate to. So I want to recognize that it can be a pretty hard thing to communicate. It is so valid if you feel like communicating boundaries or personal life changes feel challenging because we might be afraid or unsure of the response that we are going to get. And it can be hurtful when the people who we are communicating to interpret our changes and boundaries as, you think you're better than us, or you no longer want me to be a part of your life, or whatever it is that they might have heard from what we communicated, even if that's not directly what was said. And a lot of those times, those people are coming from a place of fear, right? Again, this is something that they probably haven't had to adapt to before. But it's also worth it to remind yourself some of the reasons why you even wanted to be a cycle breaker in the first place. A lot of the times, again, the positives about being a cycle breaker are we have the opportunity to upfront a lot of these generational trauma patterns, patterns of shame, grief, anxiety, depression, whatever it is that you feel like you are personally going through or that generationally your family probably has gone through. This is your opportunity to be different aside from that. That's kind of what that looks like, that disruption in the family system, sometimes, received with fear. And then what do we do now? Something someone said to me one time was that communicating your boundaries and wanting to be different is for you, not for others, and not for the family system. Now, that's not to say that it can't be. That's not to say that you being better can't also benefit your family system, because it definitely can, but it has to start with someone. It is so important to remember that it is possible that families can adapt over time. And still, what if they don't? At some point, we prompt ourselves with the question of why we are even doing something in the first place. If at the end of the day, making these changes align with your belief system and you wholeheartedly believe that this can result into you becoming a healthier, healed, better version of yourself, then we can choose to accept. Now, accept does not mean we have to like something, but accept that, okay, so and so is just not okay with this, but it's not going to necessarily stop me from looking after me and what's best for me, my mental health, and my overall well being. And because of this, I know that there are times where being the cycle breaker can particularly feel lonely, which is why I believe it is so important to seek your own therapy, self questioning, finding social connections, and meeting people who probably also want to break the same cycles as you. The reality is, there are so many people who want to be different and do different than we realize. They're just not things that we are always going out there and talking about. In the end, isn't the prize finally unlocking the most authentic version of yourself? Not everyone is trying to do better. Not everyone sees everything that you see, and not everyone is out there trying to break cycles and be a better version of themselves the same way that you are. And that's important to remember. Being a cycle breaker allows you to gain clarity on your relationships, form more authentic relationships, remove yourself from these toxic cycles that, again, you've already recognized that this doesn't no longer serve you, and that's okay. Well, this is my final look. Before I hop off, there is a question that I would like to leave you guys with, and that is, at the end of the day, who are you really living for? And who do you really want to be a part of what's coming? And that concludes this episode of Makeup and Mental Health. I will see you guys next time. Bye.